We don't know much about marijuana because it is a Schedule I drug.
All the data shows that crime will go down.
Where we've seen the most tremendous impact is in traffic fatalities related to marijuana.
We were able to start her on CBD before other pharmaceuticals, and it works for her.
We're currently offering 9 different strains. We have edibles. We got a lot of cancer patients that come in.
If you watch your kid stop breathing when she has a seizure, you're gonna do anything in the world to make that never happen again.
I'm really glad that I'm gonna get this medicine.
If I can lay my head down at night and know that I've done what's in the best interest of the child, then I've done my job.
The schools can say no.
Cotton plant has been nothing but great to us, so we want to return that favor, of course.
And cotton plant, they had too, though, but for one reason, the jobs.
Can an employer just say, we won't hire people who test positive?
There's the potential that a lot of businesses are not going to survive.
We're all learning as we go.
KATV presents Arkansas Growing, the journey from legalization to cultivation, a Channel 7 News special with your host, Chris May.
Good evening. A little more than 2 years ago, voters in Arkansas approved an amendment to the Constitution making the medical use of marijuana legal under state law. It was a bold step for an otherwise traditional state. And while it's taken time to get the program up and running, now it's here. The first product is expected to be in the hands of patients next month. Over the next hour, we're going to take a closer look at medical marijuana, at the legal challenges it presents to employers in Arkansas, and the side effects, good and bad, that come along with it. We'll tell you how schools will navigate its use among Arkansas's youngest patients, and how its economic impact might reshape the future of an impoverished city in the Delta. But we're going to begin our program tonight outside of Arkansas, in Oklahoma, where medical marijuana became the law of the land less than a year ago. How's it going so far? Maureen Glisovic traveled to the Sooner State for us.
Tonight, you'll meet a couple whose children led them into the medical marijuana industry. A dispensary owner who was the third business to open in Tulsa. The state agency who's been overwhelmed with business and patient applications. And the man who's looking out for the cannabis industry.
What are you doing? You want to fix a glass of water with Mommy? Let's do it.
People just wanted a story to get behind, and we were able to offer that Oklahoma, born and raised, taking the stigma away from the cannabis.
Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
It just became, how do we phrase this argument to people that are common people? What's going to get them to stand up and get out their door and go vote?
June 2018, question 788 passes by 57%, legalizing medical marijuana, a state statute now providing opportunities to everyday Oklahomans.
Beep, beep, beep. Vroom, 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 vroom.
One of the major spirits of 788 was very ma and pa. Everyday patients. And if they were going to be businesses, the law needs to be written in such a way that everyday Oklahomans had a shot to make it. That you didn't discount anyone or play this game of discrimination based on socioeconomic status.
Carver, a 6.5-year-old with a seizure disorder since birth. His 2.5-year-old sister, Lyra, also suffering from brain abnormalities.
Between the pharmaceuticals that Carver takes, he's able to mainly control his. He still does have seizures, though, even with heavy narcotics. But Lyra's are completely controlled with use of hemp extract oil, with CBD oil. So thankfully, with our knowledge going into it from Carver, we were able to start her on CBD before other pharmaceuticals, and it works for her.
We actually give her Charlotte's Web until we make our own. We're making our own right now. She takes a really concentrated form, so it almost shows up black, just because it's got such a high concentration in it. And this is basically like 50 milligrams per milliliter of CBD. So most people may only take, 10 or 20 like for normal, like everyday wellness, but she takes about 120 a day.
We didn't look into it at first, obviously, with Carver. We just kind of felt like we were just pushed into the modern, Western medicine where...
Because how could we, even look at it and then jeopardize our parental rights? And, no one's going to ever love Carver's and as much as we do.
And we just wanted to produce medicine that would be quality enough for our own kids. And so we basically wanted to kind of stay behind the curtain and provide other dispensaries options. But then since people knew us from 788 and they knew that we were going to have a cultivation facility, then they started asking, well, when is your dispensary going to be open and when can we come see you?
5 months after question 788 passes, a third dispensary opens in Tulsa.
Well, right now we're currently offering 9 different strains with some indicas and sativas. We have edibles, gummies, cookies. We've got vape pens that are THC infused, and coming soon will be the PAT pen. It's a very popular pen out in Colorado. When we ask you what are you interested in, what are you looking for? Some people are looking for some they got anxiety and they don't want to be stressed. Some people are looking for something that has some CBD in it, which helps with pain. And some people are looking for something a little bit stronger just so, they can go to sleep at night. We got some literature that we kind of keep here, so if anybody wants to read up on, for example, the sour cheese, it's good for stress, depression, pain, lack of appetite. We got a lot of cancer patients that come in and they really need to eat and they don't feel good, they don't want to eat, and they don't have any appetite.
Have you always been a medical marijuana supporter?
I'd say yes, absolutely.
And was it the research, was it just the knowledge that you've always had, or what?
Probably a little bit of both, Grew up in families where we had, people who were alcoholics and seen the life that it took them, and as opposed to, marijuana over alcohol, it's a pretty easy decision that the marijuana is a lot healthier, a lot less addictive in my opinion. It's not addictive at all, and alcohol ruins lives.
The night question 788 passes, the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority is established. Just 2 months later, applications roll in.
We have a 14-day turnaround, and we have thousands of patient applications coming in each week. So it definitely is pushing its limits for us every time, every week, every Monday we come in from the weekend, and there's a queue waiting for us to get processed within that time frame. I think the idea when the question was written was that it would allow a lot of small businesses, the ability to go into business in Oklahoma and have that opportunity to be successful. And so I think that really was what drove the decision to just leave it as an open number and kind of let them compete in a way that was affordable for them to start up.
In just a few months, $8 million in fees collected from patient cards, cultivation, processing, and dispensary licenses. Enough to pay for startup costs and to sustain the state's medical marijuana program through its first year. And a 7% marijuana tax applied to products directly goes to fund the program.
We have a huge uptick in our business applications, and at $2,500 per application, that's where most of those fees are coming from. There is a really large number, actually larger than we anticipated on the business side.
Since the program's fruition, thousands of licenses for cultivation, processing, and dispensaries have been granted, along with thousands of Oklahomans receiving a medical marijuana card.
There's probably an oversaturation to a degree when you look at the number of growers to patients, but our patient number is going up, daily. But I don't know what the proper number is of how many growers and how large of a lot they have. I think that's still unknown. But there's the potential that a lot of businesses are not going to survive in the first year. Because the demand won't be great enough to support that.
And with no qualifying conditions required to become a patient, numbers could continue growing.
It's our perspective, and one of the reasons why we supported State Question 788 was because of that no restriction on qualifying conditions, that it actually puts the responsibility where it should be, which is between a physician and their patient. That physician should have the opportunity to make that recommendation like they do for every other form of medicine.
New Health Solutions of Oklahoma representing the cannabis industry, keeping track of rules and regulations and keeping a close eye on the legislature.
Right now, it's mainly reporting regulations, so you have to monthly submit reports to the OMMA that says how much product you've had on hand. If you're a grower, you have to report how many plants you have, how much you've sold, where that product's gone. Same thing for a processor. They have to report what they've purchased, what they've processed, what they've sold. For the dispensaries, they have to report their inventory on hand and what their sales have been as well. We have a pretty outstanding issue with gun ownership, and that's nationally. And this is one of the reasons why that the state question was written this way, was to protect that patient privacy. And because we're still in this gray area of state versus federal conflicting law, every state has been very reluctant to have federal law enforcement have access to any of these databases, because we just don't know if they would come and try to enforce any of those prohibitions or try to take people's guns.
Oklahoma remains a free market, while Arkansas limited license numbers and allowed 5 people to dictate a merit-based program. A stark difference from 2 southern states sharing a state line.
When you implement a merit-based program like that, there's all sorts of room for corruption, and you're limiting an industry and its actual growth. So really, we weren't surprised what we've seen in Arkansas.
Up next, we'll take you to Woodruff County and the unlikely home of a state-of-the-art growing facility. How medical marijuana could breathe new life into a dying Arkansas town.
Cotton plant has been nothing but great to us, so we want to return that favor, of course.
And cotton plant, they're just enthused over it. They enthused over it for one reason, the jobs.
Rice, soybeans, cotton. They're just a few of the cash crops that power Arkansas's economy, and most are produced in the eastern third of the state. Well, now that area hosts a new crop grown openly and legally for the first time. We're, of course, talking about marijuana. And for one city in Woodruff County, it's helping provide a brighter future.
Didn't it rain, children?
78 miles east of Little Rock on a straight stretch of Highway 38 in Woodruff County, you'll find the unlikely epicenter of one of the most significant social changes to come to Arkansas in more than 60 years.
Hey, children.
Until now, the city of Cotton Plant was best known as the birthplace of Sister Rosetta Thorpe. Often called the godmother of rock and roll, she helped popularize gospel music in the 1930s. And though 45 years have passed since her death, she remains the city's pride and joy. Cotton Plant even hosts a music festival in her honor. Every March, it draws fans from around the world. But when the music stops, life here moves at a different tempo.
Cotton Plant is a quiet, sleepy town. It has had its ups and it has had its downs over the last 2 or 3 decades. It has declined.
There's no hiding the truth. Walk along Main Street and you'll see empty storefronts, buildings in disrepair, and few people. Even for the Delta, where struggle can be a way of life, Cotton Plant seems on the brink.
We no longer have a bank. We hadn't had a bank here in a number of years, 15, 20 years now. Currently, we're considered a food desert because we don't have any grocery stores at all. The closest thing we have to a grocery store is one small convenience store. People have to travel away from here just to get a gallon of gas. You can't even buy gas in this town.
Willard Ryland is the president of the Cotton Plant Area Chamber of Commerce and the city's former mayor. He grew up here, and he knows Cotton Plant's history, how it transformed from a booming city powered by cotton gins and a plywood mill to what it is today. He traces the city's decline to the early 1970s.
When schools integrated, there was white flight, and there was a lot of people that just moved away. And they moved to Searcy, and people moved to Little Rock, and people moved to Desert.
As cotton plant's population dwindled from almost 2,000 at its peak in 1950 to just 649 today, the business sector started to contract. Local jobs became scarce. By 2004, the city's only high school was closed down, and a decade later, its elementary school was consolidated.
We had very small numbers. I think we had less than 50 children in the entire school at the time in 2013, and the school superintendent, they looked at the numbers and said, we cannot afford for this school to remain open. At that point, our children start being bused. Even our kindergarten kids are bused to Augusta School, which is basically 28 miles away. The school's closed, industry moved away, people have to live, and they move away where they can accommodate their families. You know, a community is a dying community.
As mayor, Ryland refused to allow his city to die. He began aggressively recruiting businesses to come to Cotton Plant. But from Dollar General store to banks, the answer was consistently no. So imagine the mayor's surprise when he received a phone call in 2017, a group of businessmen reaching out with a proposal.
When they came out with saying that we're thinking about bringing a growing facility for medical marijuana to Cotton Plant, Arkansas, for a second or two, it was dead silence. This got to be a joke.
It was no joke. A group calling itself Bold Team LLC was applying for one of 5 licenses to grow medical marijuana in Arkansas. Applicants who promised to set up shop in economically depressed areas were awarded bonus points by the state, and a member of Bold Team just happened to have family from Cotton Plant. And it was there where they hoped to construct a $6 million facility.
It was overwhelming to the point where I literally almost cried, because I said, well, God has sent us what's going to help change this community. And I said, and we didn't really have to do anything but just be receptive to it.
Cotton Plant has been nothing but great to us, so we want to return that favor, of course.
Robert Lurcher is Bold Team's Director of Customer Relations. His wife Kendall is the Medical Director and owns 25% of the company. Their initial plan, he says, was to build on a parcel of land between Beebe and Searcy. But when Ryland seemed receptive to bringing the operation to Cotton Plant, they quickly shifted gears.
And when we came here and met the mayor at that time, it was open arms and got to meet some of the people in the community, and we found home here, and we're proud to be here in Cotton Plant.
Pledging to come to Cotton Plant helped Bold Team LLC rack up the second highest point total among all applicants for a cultivation license. With the mayor and the 6-member city council on board, construction commenced. And in January, they planted the first legal medical marijuana plants in Arkansas. Here, inside a 45,000 square foot facility built on 8.5 acres of the Cotton Plant Industrial Park, a short drive from Main Street.
To give a baseball analogy, if I will, I feel like we're in the top of the first of the game of cannabis in Arkansas. Like there's just so much that hasn't happened, and we're in the beginning stages, and that's what is so exciting about it.
It's just kind of scratching the surface.
100%.
Yeah. Bold Team is paying the city $1,500 a month to lease the land, and more importantly, 1% of its gross sales for the right to be there. With the market still taking shape, it's unclear exactly how much that will be. But with demand for medical marijuana expected to be high, the numbers will add up.
Every state that has legalized so far ahead of Arkansas has been between 2.2 and 3.1% of the state's population that goes to be medical. Arkansas is nearly 3 million people, so we're expecting between 60,000 and 90,000 cardholders after the first 18 months of it being on the market.
In all likelihood, that will translate to hundreds of thousands of dollars for the city each year, perhaps as much as a third of its overall budget. Bold Team is also bringing between 20 and 25 jobs to the area. With their 7 flower bays, each growing 650 plants year-round, they'll need the help.
When we're fully operational, we should be taking down 200 pounds a week. One of these flower bays, when we harvest this, these plants should yield around 200 pounds of usable product.
They've pledged to hire locally. Of the 6 workers brought on so far, 4 are from cotton plants, and more positions in harvesting and packaging will soon be filled. Good jobs that pay between $12 and $15 an hour.
We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but this is a start. This is a start for cotton plant. And cotton plant, they're just enthused over it. They enthused over it for one reason, the jobs.
Clara Harston Brown was elected mayor of Cotton Plant in November. She's the first woman to hold the office. She says most residents of the city, herself included, had to adjust to the idea of hosting this business in their backyard.
I'm not in love with marijuana. I'm not, but this is for medical purpose. It's not for the, you go out there and you smoke and come back being a fool because you don't know what you're smoking. So now you got a chance to know what you're smoking, and then supposed to help you. If they're gonna help somebody's back, stop people from having seizure, hey, I don't have no problem with it.
With the added revenues, the mayor hopes to provide a raise for city employees, beautify the Main Street corridor, and recruit new industry. Perhaps they'll even make progress on removing this pile of illegally dumped car tires that happens to sit on a lot next door to the marijuana facility. Mayor Brown calls the arrival of Bold Team a miracle.
I want these citizens to have a place to go to work, and I want a store around here where they could go shopping. I want a service station around here for them. I want something for the children. Marijuana plant, they're going to benefit the whole city. The whole city.
And it's not just city leaders who are dreaming big.
The whole time this thing has started as a business and a way to make money, but throughout the process, it's kind of been something like doing something right and doing something that's good. And if that school could come back, that would tickle me. I don't know what it takes to get something like that done, of course, but that'd be something that was to be part of that. You know, that'd be great.
Almost every day, I do research on communities where medical marijuana is growing, and there seems to be a 30 to 40% growth spurt associated with that, with different industries and different businesses that gravitate to it. Cotton plant, I don't believe it's going to be any different.
I don't want no big city like Little Rock, but that's a few stores, another housing, maybe a hotel up somewhere around here. Well, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for change.
Why not the Delta help support its own self, rather than the Delta being the poorest part of the region? It can now become one of the wealthiest. With the casinos being brought about in the Delta, several of the medical marijuana facilities, several of the dispensaries, that's wealth that's coming to the Delta.
But they hadn't, marijuana hadn't came, well, I put it like this, we'd be still living on a prayer. We'd be still living on a prayer. This town is not going anywhere. It's buried in people's heart. Come back home, start your business. Hey, now's the time. Now is the time.
Next, Jana's story. This 8-year-old is the youngest person in the state to receive a medical marijuana certification. But her school district was reluctant to add cannabis oil to her health care plan.
If you watch your kid stop breathing when she has a seizure, you're gonna do anything in the world to make that never happen again.
I'm really glad that I'm gonna get this medicine.
Schools can say no.
We'll look at the legal questions schools in the natural state are facing when Arkansas Growing, the journey from legalization to cultivation, continues.
For a more in-depth look at how medical marijuana will impact Arkansas, go to KATV.com and look under the News tab for Arkansas Growing.
Schools are among the most sacred of safe spaces, stable learning environments for children, and drug-free zones in all 50 states. So what happens when a student needs to use a cannabis-based medicine during the school day? Janelle Lilly now with the story of 8-year-old Jana, whose medical marijuana certification raised concerns and new questions for educators.
Jana's mother desperately searched for a way to control her little girl's seizures. Traditional medication helped, but it didn't completely stop the occurrences, and sometimes the side effects were worse than the seizures themselves. Medical cannabis provided what they hoped was the answer until the school district started raising questions.
Did you spend some time at Miss Leslie's today?
Yes.
Huh?
On the outside, 8-year-old Jana looks like a normal, healthy kid, but she's not.
The only thing a little 8-year-old girl wants is to feel normal and to be in the classroom with her friends and go play out on the, monkey bars. She's not allowed on monkey bars when she has a seizure. She's not allowed to climb up on things. She's not,
Jana has frontal lobe epilepsy. At one point, after a particularly scary seizure, she couldn't recall her own name or call out for her mom.
Whenever Jana first started school, her seizures weren't controlled.
Jana had several seizures at school, often being sent home anytime she felt ill out of fear that she would have another one in class. That was a little embarrassing for a little kid trying her best to fit in.
I don't know what's happening. I don't even know what it feels like. All I feel is just a little bit of pressure.
Does it scare you afterwards to know how people react to you adults? Are they worried when that happens? What do the adults around you do?
They normally cry. They think I might pass away or something like that, and well, I'm pretty lucky because I haven't.
To do the E, we start on the bottom.
They put her on medication, but the side effects were almost as terrifying as the seizures.
She didn't sleep for like 3 weeks, and whenever she did doze off, she would have a night terror, and she would wake up screaming and then run around while she was still sleeping.
That's when Sarah started desperately researching alternatives to prescription medication. She read about other children like Jana who had success controlling those misfires in the brain using medical cannabis.
Seizures do cause damage. I mean, they cause damage to the brain, and the only way I can explain it is if you watch your kid stop breathing when she has a seizure, you're gonna do anything in the world to make that never happen again.
Sarah applied for and received a medical marijuana certification from Jana's doctor. She was the youngest person to receive a card in the state. Right now, Jana switched to a new medication, Keppra, which has limited the number of seizures, and she's using a legal hemp-based oil, but they plan to switch to a cannabis-based oil when distribution begins in Arkansas. Sarah has received a lot of criticism for her decisions for Jana.
I've had a lot of that. I've had messages on Facebook sent to me and stuff like that. And I mean, the best way is to try to educate people. Some people don't want to be educated. First of all, my kid's not smoking a joint. It's an oil. It's an oral oil. And it's in a dropper. You give it to her just like Tylenol, just like a kid's liquid Tylenol. It has such a small amount of THC just to activate the cannabinoids that she could pass a drug test. I mean, it's not enough to amount to anything. So it's not going to do anything but stop the misfires in her brain.
Even so, when Sarah approached Jana's old school district about adding the cannabis oil to their school health care plan, she was met with resistance.
It's still federally legal, so the schools can say no. They have that it's their obligation to, determine which way they want to go there.
The school was hesitant to allow the nurse to dispense that oil, instead suggesting that Sarah leave work, drive to school during the day, pull Jana out of class, take her off campus, and give her the oil herself. Instead, they switched school districts.
I would have done it. I mean, it's my kid. That she needs it. It's definitely a lot more convenient to have somebody that says, hey, if she needs it, I'll give it to her. That's not a problem.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good.
At the Mount Vernon Enola School District, Principal Leslie Casey discussed it with her superintendent, but she said it really wasn't a tough decision for the school to make.
We really don't differentiate between this and any other medically necessary medication that a child needs to thrive.
Principal Casey has a background teaching kids with special needs and was familiar with the neurological issues that often accompany kids with epilepsy, like dyslexia and speech issues, which have both made learning harder for Jana.
Hey, Jana. We're talking about one part of the plant, that has nothing to do with the other. We're talking about something that could help her neurological pathways to stabilize so she can learn, so she doesn't have word finding issues. So, if we're building a literate and healthy society, if they need that, that's what they need.
But we've learned D.
But the bottom line is, schools can ban medical cannabis in their districts, even for a student with a certified condition and a certification card. The State Board of Nursing says school nurses will not endanger their license by administering it, even though it's technically unprescribed, as long as it's part of the student's health care plan. But right now, it'll be up to each district to decide policy.
And as an administrator, I guess what gives me peace is that if I can lay my head down at night and know that I've done what's in the best interest of the child, then I've done my job.
For now, Jana and her mom are waiting for the first dispensaries in Arkansas to become operational.
I'm really glad that I'm going to get this medicine.
Jana's already made progress in her new district.
And then we walk away.
Doing better in class and enjoying school.
So overall, how's your life?
Normal like other kids.
But her mom thinks the best is yet to come for her little girl who just wants to fit in.
But she's gonna drive someday. She's gonna want a family someday. She's gonna be an adult. And I want to ensure that she gets to do everything everybody else does.
Sarah says she's thankful for this school and district, but at the same time she's worried for others whose districts aren't as accommodating. She'd like to see the law changed, making it mandatory for districts to allow students with certifications access at school. It's something she and Jana both started lobbying lawmakers for a year ago.
I really wish that they would have a little bit more compassion towards the families. I'm sure that at some point it's going to be abused. I mean, so are opioids, so are pain pills, so are, but an 8-year-old girl isn't going to abuse it. We just want a little bit of security.
Still ahead tonight, the social impact of legal marijuana around the country, the good and the bad.
Where we've seen the most tremendous impact is in traffic fatalities related to marijuana.
You're watching Arkansas Growing, the journey from legalization to cultivation.
You're watching Arkansas Growing, the journey from legalization to cultivation. And now, back to your host, Chris May.
Marijuana was marketed as medicine to Arkansas voters, and like many medicines, there can be side effects. Jason Peterson takes a look at what other states around the country have experienced following legalization.
Colorado was one of the first states to legalize marijuana for medicinal use and then later for recreational use. 33 states have legalized marijuana in one form or another, and several other states are on the verge. But marijuana remains illegal in the eyes of the federal government. Because of that classification, scientific studies on the usage and impact of marijuana use are not federally funded and harder to find. But a real-time study has been going on in America for a decade now. The expanding use of marijuana in state after state is producing data.
Colorado is one of the states producing such data.
We don't know much about marijuana because it is a Schedule I drug. So we're all learning. Local governments are learning, state governments, federal government, and us on the ground. We're all learning as we go.
When we visited Colorado in 2012, medical marijuana was already legal, and voters were on the verge of making Colorado the first in the nation to make weed and THC-infused products available for recreational use. We spoke to several people concerned about the direction Colorado was heading.
Kids and adolescents that start using at an earlier age are less likely to obtain a high school or college degree. That heavy users over a long period of time have demonstrated a decrease in their IQ.
This predicted side effect has never really materialized. Statistics released this year by the Colorado Department of Education show that the state's high school graduation rate is up 8.3% since 2010. Last year, the high school dropout rate was 2.2%, an all-time low. Several states and federal studies have found that as access to legal marijuana in America has gone up, marijuana use among teenagers has gone down. Maybe it's less cool when it's legal. Also going down, the number of marijuana-related court filings. They've been cut in half, from just under 12,000 in 2012 to just over 5,000 in 2017. There are less weed-related citations clogging up the courts and messing up a person's criminal record. Something that has gone up in Colorado is tax revenue from marijuana sales. Retail and medical marijuana shops tallied at least $1.5 billion in sales in 2017. Colorado's cut was $247 million. That's way up from the $67 million in 2014. That money benefits schools, local governments, and the pet projects of lawmakers. Colorado's marijuana industry puts nearly 18,000 people to work full-time. But the price of pot has fallen 70% over the past 4 years in Colorado. That, and a burgeoning black market, is threatening some businesses and cutting into revenue forecasts.
When you hear that, well, if you legalize it, it'll get rid of the black market, we've not seen that to be true. Not only the black market going out of state, but within the state, because they can undercut the amount of money you're charging for legal marijuana.
7 years ago, we visited with Colorado Drug Task Force Director Tom Gorman. He did not foresee the emergence of a black market, but he was concerned about another possible side effect of legalization, an increase in crime. Senator Cory Booker has proposed legislation that would legalize marijuana nationwide.
If you're all about public safety, all the data shows that crime will go down, that violent crime will go down.
In his latest book, Tell Your Children, The Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence, New York Times reporter Alex Berenson reports that Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, the 4 states that legalized marijuana in 2014 and 15, have all seen sharp increases in murder and aggravated assaults since legalization. Combined, the 4 states have seen a 35% increase in murders and a 25% increase in assaults between 2013 and 2017. Is legalizing marijuana solely to blame for this? No, but to say crime rates are falling where marijuana has been legalized is not true. The legalization of marijuana has become a political issue as Democrats and libertarians generally support the idea and conservatives generally oppose it.
Marijuana, from a medicinal standpoint, directly competes with legal prescription painkillers and drugs that statistically kill 100,000 people a year. There has not been one documented death due to marijuana. That's on the medical side.
They mean nobody's overdosed from it. There have been people who have died from edibles, jumping off a balcony, committing suicide. There have been people that have been, you're going to tell the mother of the little 8-year-old girl that somebody loaded on marijuana that killed her on her little bicycle, that nobody died from marijuana? So I think that is a false argument. I'll agree nobody we know of has died from an overdose. Plenty of people have died because of marijuana.
Gorman says drugged driving in Colorado has been a sobering side effect of legalization. According to the Colorado Department of Public Safety, over 70% of the nearly 4,000 drivers charged with driving under the influence in 2016 also tested positive for marijuana. In a survey of 15,000 Colorado cannabis users, 70% admitted to driving under the influence of marijuana at least once during the past year. 40% said they don't think marijuana affects their ability to drive. In 2013, the number of drivers in fatal accidents who tested positive for THC was 55. By 2017, that number had grown to 139. 20% of all Colorado traffic deaths are now marijuana-related, and the numbers are likely higher as not all coroners test for the drug.
Where we've seen the most tremendous impact is in traffic fatalities related to marijuana. We went up, while traffic fatalities in the state of Colorado went up 35% during that period of time, those related to marijuana went up 150%.
In the first 4 states to legalize marijuana for recreational use, which is already being campaigned for here in Arkansas, traffic accidents increased 6% when compared to states where marijuana had not been legalized in any form. Not surprisingly, auto insurance rates in states that have legalized marijuana have also increased.
Here is an example. A 16-year-old lad apprehended in the act of staging a holdup. 16 years old and a marijuana addict.
The 1936 propaganda film Reefer Madness depicts smoking pot as leading to hysteria, promiscuity, violence, and even death.
I know what you want. You want to kill me. You're crazy. Take it easy, kid. I just want to talk to you.
It has become a cult classic because of its exaggerated acting and over-the-top alarmist presentation of the dangers of smoking pot. Berenson's book is also sounding an alarm and takes its name, Tell Your Children, straight from Reefer Madness. But the book is full of statistics from legitimate sources, like the National Academy of Medicine, which has found that cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of schizophrenia and other psychosis, and that the higher the potency, the greater the risk.
I think the most frequent thing that the ER doctors are going to see is cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, meaning directly related to cannabis use. So those are people who have persistent vomiting. They're usually screaming. And in Colorado, they've actually nicknamed it scromiting, as a combination of screaming and vomiting.
Another side effect of legalization is more marijuana-related hospitalizations. In the year 2000 in Colorado, there were 575. By 2016, the number was up to over 3,500. Physicians say the main reason for so many bad trips is what you smoke today is a far cry from your daddy's weed.
Cannabis we're talking about today is much different than it was in the 80s. The cannabis back in the 80s had less than 2% THC. Today's cannabis is most likely 20% THC. So you're talking, not double, not triple, a 10-fold increase in potency, and that's just for your normal joint. Beyond that, if you're talking oils, waxes, dabs, those things can get up to 80 to 90% THC.
When we interviewed Dr. Ken Finn in 2012, the increased potency of today's pot was one of his primary concerns. 7 years later, he says it still is, but he fears the genie is out of the bottle and it will be near impossible to put it back in.
And the evidence is piling up, as well as the bodies are piling up, related to mass commercialization and expansion of marijuana programs in our state and other states. We're really, we have a marijuana epidemic now. I think our national administration has acknowledged our opioid epidemic. They've also acknowledged our vaping epidemic, and I think they really need to acknowledge we have a marijuana epidemic that is not coming. It's already here.
What effect will medical marijuana have on the workforce in the natural state?
Can an employer just say, we won't hire people who test positive?
That story, when Arkansas Growing, continues. Arkansas has moved deliberately in implementing its medical marijuana program, but no amount of patience or care can eliminate uncertainty. Questions and even confusion about the drug and its place in society are inevitable, and that includes questions about workers. Here again is our Janelle Lilly.
Many big businesses call Arkansas home, including Tyson, J.B. Hunt, and of course, the world's largest by revenue, Walmart. But right now, these big Arkansas companies face the same questions as Arkansas's smallest mom and pop shops. What effect will medical marijuana have on the workforce when dispensaries open in April?
From the biggest company in the world to the smallest mom and pop shop, each Arkansas business facing the same questions about the workforce when dispensaries open in April.
A lot of folks think that there'll be 20,000 registry identification card holders by 2020.
And most of those cardholders will be employed. Marijuana is still illegal on the federal level, and that's reflected in federal employment law. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against disabled employees. That includes those recovering from drug addiction, but not those who currently use illegal drugs. So while licensed physicians can certify or even prescribe medical marijuana in some states, the ADA won't save an employee from being fired. That's been upheld time and again by courts across the country. Daniel Harrington has worked in labor law for more than 20 years.
The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the courts have been virtually uniform in saying that employers don't have to accommodate an employee under the Americans with Disabilities Act in the use of medical marijuana.
Many Arkansas workers who are cardholders will be surprised to know their protection from getting fired is limited, and businesses can likely continue zero-tolerance drug policies. But as has been true for Arkansas during this whole process, the devil is in the details. Arkansas's law was modeled after Arizona's, and while Arizona specifically prohibits discrimination for a patient's positive drug test, Arkansas lawmakers left that out of our state law.
Arkansas doesn't have number 2. That was a volitional choice by our legislature, I believe, to say we're not going to protect an employee from the consequences of a positive drug test. We're simply going to protect them from discrimination on their status of being a card holder.
But even that's just a guess. The only thing certain is when distribution begins, it won't be long until these questions end up here in the Arkansas Supreme Court. Cases about a card holder who uses medical marijuana over the weekend and who's not impaired while on the job.
This employee tests positive for marijuana, but there was no other signs that they were impaired at work. They produced their registry identification card to the medical review officer and they're fired. That's going to be a lawsuit eventually. Somebody's going to have to defend that.
Especially difficult because right now, no tests can show that a person was under the influence of marijuana. Either you test positive or you don't. Even more questionable, those pre-employment drug screenings.
They haven't violated our policy because they don't work for us yet, right? The ingestion of the marijuana 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago doesn't violate the employer's policy. So I think that's one where, again, a court's going to have to say, can an employer just say, we won't hire people who test positive?
Despite the time and expense of litigation, some of his business clients have already told him they're willing to fight for zero tolerance in court.
If we have to be the test case, we'll be the test case, but we think the safety of our employees and our customers and the public is important enough to take on that fight.
When we come back, some closing thoughts. "27 years ago today, on the presidential campaign trail, Arkansas's Governor Bill Clinton reluctantly admitted he had, as a young man,
experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale. And never.
How things have changed. Today, we've watched as a majority of Arkansas voters has approved the drug's use, not for recreational purposes, but to help ease the symptoms of cancer, of arthritis, of Alzheimer's disease. We've approved it for those who suffer with seizures and Tourette's and HIV/AIDS. There is no doubt the arrival of medical marijuana in Arkansas is big business for some, and for many, it remains unwelcome. But for thousands of our family, friends, and neighbors, it is about compassion. There will surely be questions and controversies as we move forward, but one thing we can know for sure, we're undertaking that journey together, and it begins now. I'm Chris May. For all of us here at KATV, thanks for joining us. Good night.
Arkansas Growing has been a Channel 7 News special presentation. For a more in-depth look at how medical marijuana will impact Arkansas, go to KATV.com and look under the News tab for Arkansas Growing.